Well, hello and welcome again to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour, and today is Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. And if you have any of those to share with us, please do so. One way to do that is to go to your app store and type in the word Needle, N-E-D-L, and download the Needle app. It's AI for live radio, and if you do that, it will let you have the access to be able to type in a comment or raise a hand to be a live caller through the app. Otherwise, you can just listen to the show live at live.needle.com/DRMICHAELRYCE. And we appreciate whenever anybody reaches out to us. If you prefer not to, or if you're listening to the archives and you'd like to get a comment or a question answered, you can send us an email. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment from you, we'll address it on the internet show, and then, as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody does that, because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service, and that is beyond words easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. So, again, send us an email or raise a hand through the Needle app, and we can have a conversation. I have an upcoming interview today with a gentleman, Ross Ellenhorn, who is one of the unique individuals who understands that the mental health system, the way it's currently provided through the allopathic medical model is less than humane and less than effective. And he has pioneered. If you go to Ellenhorn.com, you can start reading about this community-based approach to mental health treatment. And all hands on deck. It includes psychiatrists, it includes therapists, it includes well-researched based approaches to help people understand and work with any challenges they might have in their mental health, and do it in the format of being engaged in their community, as opposed to the classic style of, or not classic so much, but what we've evolved into in this day and age is a model that says, oh, if you have a mental illness, you're ill and you need to be treated by doctors and you need to be isolated from the public and you need to get all of your symptoms managed before we reintegrate you back into the community. And the Ellenhorn model says, let's work on both of these things together. Let's keep you plugged into your family and community. Let's help you manage whatever experiences you might be having that are either unpleasant for you or for others. And let's do this at the same time. Let's blend this. Let's not label people as sick and damaged and broken. Let's talk about human beings living in this rich, complex life that we have access to, that's physically, mentally, and emotionally challenging at times, and let's experience what it's like to treat each other with decency and respect and compassion, even when it's difficult. So that's an interview I'll be doing later today. It'll get posted. I'll mention it when it gets posted live on Journey's Dream in a couple weeks. And it's just, as I mentioned, I think once or twice already this week, an example of if somebody you know has written a good book or has a powerful podcast or has a program that you or one of your family members have been through that you thought was really helpful that's related to mental health work, I'd be interested in following that lead and seeing if they're willing to be interviewed, either for the Mind Shifter Radio or for the On Your Mind podcast hosted by Journey Stream. So please let us know how this is landing for you and how we can support you. As I mentioned the other day as I was reading from the book A Course of Love, that I have a challenge sometimes with the way it's written, with the pacing, with the level of questioning that is not genuine questioning. It's like, here's a question for you to ponder, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make a statement as I ask this question. And so I struggle with that. And so as I'm reading this A Course of Love book, I'm trying to make it as palatable as possible. It doesn't flow like Dietrich Wolzak's Choose Love or Christian Sundberg's A Walk in the Physical or The Way of Mastery, because it uses these literary devices that make it seem choppier to my sensibilities. And it also has different places in the book where, even though it says you are this energy that we call love, you are love and you are part of the Creator, etc., it also uses the word love as a verb. It also talks about you doing this thing called love. And that is, it's a sticking point, especially for Dr. Michael Ryce and his work. He's spent a lot of time trying to make sure that people, especially on the internet shows and support groups, that they are very clear about talking about love as this energy of creation, the stuff that we are. It's a noun, it's not a verb. It's not an action we do to people. We can do actions from that space of that creative energy that we call love. We can do actions motivated by that energy, but it is not a verb. And so as we're in chapter 4 of A Course of Love, it starts out with that. It starts out by talking about when you love purely, as though you're doing this action of love, you know God whether you realize it or not. So to rephrase that, I would say, do you have to be aware of your nature, true nature, as love in order to know what love is? When you are aware of your true nature and extend it to others, in that sense, you know your Creator, whether you realize it or not. And this is, an essential piece for us to be consistent in this work. If we bounce back and forth between using the word love as a verb and using it as a noun, especially people who are just trying to grab the concepts in this work, they're going to get confused. So what does it mean to love purely? Well, it doesn't mean anything, because in this work we talk about being love. So what does it mean to be love? It means to be consciously aware of your true nature. It means to get centered in your awareness in that true nature before you decide how to interpret and respond to the situations that seem to be around you. They seem to be arising around you or outside of you. Dale Allen Hoffman, who likes to talk about the original meanings of words from the ancient Aramaic and the Greek, he talks about the word faith. And whatever word in the ancient Aramaic that was translated into various things and comes down to us as the English word faith, that ancient Aramaic word had a meaning more like taking an action only after you've gotten in touch with the rooted center of your being. Acting from the rooted center of your being. So to me, what that means is taking the time to take a breath and get centered, like the Way of Mastery calls us to so many times throughout its lessons, and recognize that we are not the ones who created ourselves. We are not the ones keeping our heart beating and our breath moving. We are being lived. We're being seen through. We are an extension of a creative energy that goes way beyond what our conscious logical mind can pay attention to. And in that context, if we become consciously aware of that, then our actions are going to be informed by that experience and experiential knowledge of our true nature. And that's what I believe A Course of Love and A Course in Miracles and the Way of Mastery is calling us to do on a regular basis. Now, there are some exercises that are given in the Way of Mastery, and they're given as exercises. Here's an exercise for you, etc. And yet, there are a number of them that I believe have been given they kind of snuck in, and instead of being listed as an exercise, it's just a question. What if you did this? And one of them we've talked about indirectly here is, what if before every interaction you have with another person, you take a breath and you remind yourself that all minds are joined, that there is no such thing as a stranger in your life, that you are only interacting with other beings of brilliance and light, other brothers and sisters, other offspring of the Creator in your life who are doing the same thing you are, who are being extensions of the creative energy and learning about their journey as they live it. Right? Hardly anybody has had the experience of coming into the physical realm and having an owner's manual attached to their body when they were born that tells them exactly what to do and how to do it and what their purpose is, etc. So everyone you meet is in the same situation you are. And there are no strangers. There are no enemies outside of yourself. It's another thing that Dale Ellen Hoffman talks about in terms of the ancient Aramaic, that the word for enemy is the definition for that word in the ancient Aramaic is a lot closer to anyone in whose presence you find yourself holding your breath. So it's not the person, it's the interpretation that you generate and place on your interactions with that person that leads you to feel like you need to tighten and tense and hold your breath and brace for danger. And that's all it means. It's not, in that sense, the word enemy isn't a definition of somebody else. It's a definition of a process that arises within me when I make a judgment about someone else outside of me. And in that process, I initiate a tightness and a tension and a defensiveness which can't help but color my perception, drive my perception. In the Way of Mastery, it says over and over, the choice is always yours. And so you can enter every one of your minutes and ask yourself, what is this moment for? What do I decree this moment to be? What do I most want to learn by teaching it, by being it in this moment? Again, this is another exercise. It's not listed as an exercise. It's just right in the middle of a lesson in the Way of Mastery. Before every moment, before I interact with the people around me or any situation, I can choose to remind myself that I have the choice of how I interpret and respond to life in every moment. And I can ask myself, what is this moment for? I can ask myself, what do I decree this moment to be or to be about? What meaning do I give it? And what is it that I want to extend in this moment? How do I want to teach by being what I'm teaching? Or I could remind myself before every interaction with another person, there is no such thing as a stranger. All minds are joined. So how will I use my time? How can I remind myself before I interact with somebody that everyone I interact with is just another being of brilliance and light, just like I am. And they've either temporarily forgotten their brilliance or they've yet to be exposed to it if they're doing anything that I would consider as less than loving. And in that moment, I'm free to choose to interpret their behavior not as an attack on me, but as a cry for help and healing. And if I'm willing to do that, and I let that inform my process of perception, my process of perception is going to show me a myriad of ways to be a blessing to myself and others in that moment. So there's a shortcut. I could choose to just ask on a regular basis, from breath to breath, how can I be a blessing to myself and others? What's mine to do here to be a blessing, to bless myself and others? It's another exercise that's kind of hidden in the book, The Way of Mastery. The other thing that it brings us back to over and over again is the idea of judgment, which our culture insists is so important and so necessary, and we need to judge right, and we need to remove negative judgments and get back to the right judgment. Deep teachings like the Way of Mastery and spiritual teachings say, you know what? All judgment is a distraction from the flow of life. It separates me from the flow of life. And so the more I can recognize when I have judged, the more I can tune into that tightness or tension that arises within me when I've judged, I can take a step back and choose to cancel my judgment and or cancel my goal for the person in front of me, which of course is a powerful, wonderful part of the reality management worksheet process. Now, why would I cancel a goal, especially if it's a loving goal? I cancel a goal because if I set that goal in my mind and I experience anything other than this deep connection to my true nature as the energy of love expressing in form, then something in me, in my mental, emotional, intellectual processes, has connected this goal with something less than love. And as long as I keep focused on the goal and try and march towards it or complain about how it's not getting met, I don't get access to see the hidden part of my own mind where these two not so pleasant things, or more than one pleasant thing, has been connected with this goal. And if I cancel the goal, I get access to that hidden part of my mind, and then I can resolve it. I can disconnect the negative emotional response from the goal. Once I've done that, if I want to reestablish that goal, wonderful. It's fabulous. If I establish that goal and I feel calm, safe, centered, and loving, then I march on and I pour more mind energy into that goal and do whatever efforts I have control over to make it happen. That process helps me construct a life that I prefer. Going after a goal that doesn't get met while I'm experiencing something less than love has me living in hell, has me chasing after something outside of me without the realization that somewhere inside of me there's a false connection between that goal and something unlike my true nature. Whether it's a traumatic energy, whether it's a negative belief about myself or somebody. And so if I'm coming from this calm, centered awareness of my true nature as a miracle expressing in form, a miracle of life, a miracle of the creative energy, a miracle of the mind of God, of the Creator, of the one mind, whatever you want to call it, if I'm acting from that awareness, I'm in the conscious, active, present love, or I'm in that space of total, perfect, conscious, active, present love that Dr. Michael Ryce used to talk about. And just to be clear, as I said earlier, I think this is woven through the message of the Course of Love and Way of Mastery and Course in Miracles, that you are always total, perfect, active, present love. You may not always be conscious of it. So to move to total, perfect, conscious, active, present love before I act is a really good beginning point on this path. So to come back to A Course of Love, it uses the word love as a verb. I try to correct that where I can. the reading says, false idols must be brought to light, and they're seen as the nothing that they are before you can love for love's sake, before you can act from your awareness of yourself as love. And then it says, what is a false idol? What you think love will get you is the false idol. You're entitled to all that love would give, but not what you think love will provide for you through its acquisition. If you're trying to do an action that you call love for the purpose of acquiring something, whether it's a particular response from another person or the world in general, that's a false idol. And it says this is a classic example of not recognizing what love actually is. Love and longing are so intimately attached because they join together at the moment of separation, when a choice to go away from love and a choice to return were birthed in unison. So you can't leave, you can't pretend you're leaving without instantly creating the longing to reconnect. Love has thus not ever lost, was not ever lost. It was simply overshadowed by a longing that was placed between you and your awareness of your source. And this shadow of fantasy and illusion obscured love's light and alerted you of love's eternal presence all at the same time. So you can't long for something that doesn't exist. This is back to the teaching we had with Guy Finley. You can't have a need for something that doesn't exist. And so in the moment that you're longing for this connection to your source at love, you are aware that there is this source as love. Longing is your proof of love's existence, for even here, you would not long for what is not remembered. So you have to have a remembrance of that energy. You have to have this awareness of its existence in order for you to have a craving for it or a longing for it. All your long search for proof of the Creator's existence ends here when you recognize what love is. And with this proof is proof of your existence established as well. So you couldn't be here if it wasn't for this creative energy extending. You're a part of that creative energy. In your longing for love, you recognize as well your longing for your true self. Why would you wonder who you are and what your purpose here is all about if it's not for your recognition, giving witness by your longing of what you fear you are not? And yet you surely are that thing. You are the extension of this creative energy in form. And so all of your fear ends when there is proof of your existence and it's been established. All fear is based on your inability to recognize this energy of creation that some call love, and thus the fact that you are an extension of the Creator. So it goes back and forth, massaging this concept, trying to get us to understand that everything about us that's less than loving is part of the error in thought that began when we first decided to pretend we're separate from that which created us. There's an often highlighted part in the Course of Love that reads, "We practice love by living the law of love, a law of gain, not loss. A law that says the more you give, the more you gain. There are no winners and losers under the Creator's law. Not one is given more than the other." Now, we obviously understand that when it comes to material things, some people have more than others, and yet when it comes to this essence of the creative force and the flow of life and value, we're all the same. That brings me back to one of the ways I've talked about this for years, which is to say the only significant difference between me or you and anybody else you'll ever encounter, the only significant difference has nothing to do with height and weight and gender and age and possessions. It has to do with the degree to which each of us can live in the realization that we're all the same. Live from the realization that we're all the same. If I'm actively aware that we're all connected, that full awareness prevents me in that moment from doing anything hurtful to anyone else. I know it sounds like doublespeak, and sometimes it seems like a koan, an Eastern philosophical statement that's meant to keep the mind, the conscious logical mind, spinning until it gets exhausted. And yet, I haven't found a better way to say it, that the only significant, the only valuable difference between me and anybody that's ever lived or ever will live is the degree to which either one of us can live in the moment fully aware of the truth that we're all the same. Wait a minute. The only difference between us is how we recognize that we're all the same. Sounds like doublespeak. Just play with it. Let your mind push the edges of this. If it's not doublespeak, what if it's a very accurate description of the only significant difference between people? What if two people come together and they recognize that we're all connected, and in that moment all they can do is go within themselves and quietly ask, what's mine to do to be a blessing to myself and others here? And all it results is an extension of love. In that context, there can't be anger, there can't be war, there can't be road rage, there can't be domestic violence, etc. You know, on a regular basis, I was dealing with somebody yesterday. He's in his early 30s, and he's talking about how, all these certain situations where there's justifiable anger, and he doesn't need to work on those because, and when he said that phrase, justifiable anger, or any situation where anybody would be justified in getting angry, or anybody would be angry, it brought me back, flashback to the way of mastery in the third lesson, where it says, it doesn't mean you won't get angry, but just stop justifying it. Your anger is never justified. It's a product of the internal alarm system that's there to wake you up to the fact that you've somehow created an illusion that you're separate and separated from other people, and therefore you've got certain affection for certain people and things that are closest to you, and that is a prison. And for most of us, irritation and anger and frustration are the automatic response when we wake up and feel like we're in a prison. And I get it. And I can understand why people might get angry and frustrated and hurt when they believe they're in a prison. And yet at the same time, if they can wake up and recognize that the prison is of their own creation and that they hold the key, the liberation is there with their next breath. What if nothing is wrong except my perception? What if my judgment that something is wrong is the beginning of my suffering? What if the story of the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve eating from the apple, or eating the apple from the tree that they were told not to eat. What if the deeper teachings there, and that some of the ancient teachings talk about, it's a metaphor, it's a parable about eating from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So in other words, here's a tree that grows, and its fruit will give you a knowledge of what's good and what's evil. What if it's just a parable saying, listen, as soon as you start dividing everything up between good and bad, right and wrong, you create your own suffering? How many of you look at a tree and say it's ugly? Fortunately, most people don't even think about trees that way. It's interesting. This is gorgeous. This is curious. This is unique. But I can't honestly say that I've ever heard anybody that I've been around look at a tree and say, oh, that thing is ugly. And yet, what do we do with ourselves in the mirror or with other people? We're judging. That's attractive, that's not attractive, that's ugly, that's worthless, that's stupid, that's intelligent, that's genius, that's creative, that's pedantic. We make these judgments, and what if in the beginning of a judgment is the beginning of our suffering? What if it's the doorway to hell is judgment? What if learning to live in the question opens pathways that lead to more health in us? There's some study that's been going on about awe, the word awe, A-W-E, and how if you can spend more time in that state of awe and wonder and childlike curiosity, you derive benefits at a physical level as well as a mental and emotional level. There was an interview done recently on the We Can Do Hard Things podcast where it might be Dr. Becky, it might be somebody else, but anyway, she's talking about how she's done some real serious work recently about how if you're in a creative space, you cannot also be anxious. So that anxiety cancels out creativity, and creativity cancels out anxiety. Well, a lot of people have understood this for a long time. If they get anxious or worried about something, it shuts down their creativity. So she decided to play around with, so what happens if we usher people into these guided visualizations or these creative exercises? Does it affect their ability to drop out of anxiety? And the answer is yes. As a matter of fact, that's what she finds time and time again. And so she encourages people to play with that. And so here's another study where people are playing with awe, amazement, childlike curiosity. It's distinct from joy. It's distinct from fear. And what happens if we enter that state of awe? What is the impact on us physiologically? And they've written a book, Keltner, Keltner, author of the book, Awe, the New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. And they talk about, in the article and in the podcast about it, they talk about what happens if we just ask people to go out and take a walk and find something amazing, find something to be in awe about. Look at the little things, look at the big things, and just do that for a while every day and watch what happens. And they found it was transformative. And that's all they asked them to do. it can be as simple as looking at a newly blossomed flower, look at a big sunset, look at something tiny, look at something that may be a moral beauty, which is witnessing a kindness or a generosity or a goodness from another person. And what they found was these people felt less pain, physical pain, and less distress in their lives. And he's talking about people that are 75 years old. He's not talking about 24-year-olds. Just from taking a walk with the instruction, find something to be amazed by, to be in awe of. Essentially, to do the same kind of exercise as the Way of Mastery calls us to pick up something and understand, I don't really know where this thing is. I don't know who had the first idea to create something like this. I don't know where the materials came from to create this thing. I can be in awe as I let myself understand how little I know about the world around me. Logical benefit and mental and emotional benefit to being willing to enter that state of awe, to being willing to recognize that your life as a human being is a miracle. You know, how you got here. Now, some people want to say, oh, yeah, well, our scientists can create life, you know, a test tube in a bottle, and that's test tube babies and cloning. And okay, I hear you. And yet, I've been around long enough and read enough articles in science magazines to know they're just describing something from a meta level. They don't understand how it all began. They're making guesses. And they can't start from nothing. They start with something, some substance of creation, some energy, some chromosomal material that's already alive. And from it, they build other forms of life. But the origin is beyond comprehension. So what if you spent some time every day marveling that your heart is beating without you thinking about it? That the cells in your body are repairing themselves and building new cells, and old ones are falling away when they're past their usefulness. And this system of taking a piece of fruit and ingesting it and having it become part of the body that you're walking around in is amazing. And this is true whether you're in a crisis position, in the middle of a domestic violence situation, or in a war zone, or on a Caribbean cruise. So you can tap into this miracle of life expressing as in form that is you, that is the miracle of your existence. And if you choose to do that on a regular basis, you get benefits at a mental and a physical, emotional, and spiritual level. And all of this is prompted from my trying to read in the Course of Love, where it's talking about what is this stuff we call love? What is it that I think I'm going to acquire if I try to do an action that I say is loving? What is it? How is that a false idol? How is that distracting me from the tremendous benefits I can get just from being consciously aware of my true nature and extending that to others? So the Course of Love goes on and says, when you think of acting out of love, your thoughts of love are based on sentiment, and they must be challenged. Love is not being nice when you're feeling surly. Love is not doing good deeds of charity and service. Love is not throwing logic to the wind and acting in foolish ways that pass as gaiety or masquerade as joy. You each have an image in your mind of someone that you believe knows what love is. This is perhaps an elderly person who is kind and gentle, someone with no cross word for anyone, and no concern of his or her own self. This is perhaps a mother whose love is blind and self-sacrificing. Still others of you might imagine a couple who's been long married and in which each person is devoted to the other's happiness. Or you might imagine a father whose love is unconditional, or a priest or a minister who guides unfailingly. For each or any one of these that you admire, you give attributes that you do not have and that you might hope to one day acquire when the time is right. For that kind and gentle stance you do not believe will serve you now. You think of it as blindness and self-sacrifice, as something to be gained at too high a price, something that the devotion of which you might think is fine for one whose partner is more loving than your own. That unconditional love is great, but must it not be tempered by good judgment? And surely that ability to guide others must be earned through the acquisition of a wisdom that you don't have yet. And thus your image of love is based on comparison. You've chosen one who demonstrates that which in you is most lacking, and you use that image to chastise yourself while saying that you wish you were that. Your ideas of being in love are quite another category altogether. In this context, love is not only full of sentiment, but also of romance. This stage of love is seldom seen as lasting or as something that can be maintained. It is the purview of the young, and it's the daydream of the aging. It's synonymous with passion and an overflow of feelings that defy all common sense. To be, quote, in love is to be vulnerable, for once common sense has failed to keep you acting as expected, you might forget to guard your heart, or to keep your real self in hiding. How dangerous indeed is such an act in a world where trust can turn to treachery. Well, each one of you has held an ideal of what the perfect mate might be. An ideal that changes over time. And those most bound by the ego might think of stature, of wealth and physical beauty and the trappings of a good upbringing. Those who are most insecure will believe in a partner who would shower him or her with praise and gifts, with attention that never wavers. And then another person prizes independence and seeks a partner who's in good health, who's not too demanding, a companion and a lover who will be a convenient accoutrement within a busy life. None of these are what we're talking about. This energy of the miracle of life expressing as form, that's who you are. That's what, in these teachings, this energy of love is. Always extending, always allowing, always accepting, always embracing, always trusting, and thereby transcending everything else. So, what is it that you use as a definition for love? To back up to the beginning of this section where it says, love can't be taught. It can be demonstrated, it can be extended, but it can't be taught. You can't have words about love. You can have a lot of words about what love isn't. And that's what's happening here for us in the course of love. They're trying to help us see all the things that we've falsely labeled as love as false. And that the essence of this energy of creation that gave rise to you, that continues to keep your heart beating, your food digesting, and for those of you who are lucky enough, your hair growing, that energy itself is this thing we call love. And that energy of creation always extends itself, is always, and it's never a zero-sum game. As we read earlier, the more you give it, the more you have of it. Right? And so in our culture, we are so much rooted in this zero-sum game image, the idea that, I've only got $10,000, and so if I give you $5,000, then I'm down to $5,000, and I may never get that back and never recover it. And if I have, there's only so much love to go around. I can't shower all my love on everybody the way I do my family. Well, if you define the energy of love in that case as these good deeds that you do, or on complimenting certain people, if that's your definition for love, then yes, you're right. You can't have the same amount of your time, intelligence, money, and energy going to everybody you know. And yet, you could take the very same filter for observation and questioning that says, everyone I meet is a fellow traveler, is a fellow brother or sister, is a fellow being of brilliance and light. And if they're acting towards others or towards me in that way that demonstrates they've become aware of their true nature as the energy of creation expressing in form, I will see what I call a loving gesture. I will see compassion. I will see joy. I will see a bliss state. I will see comfort and contentment. I will see connection. And if they've either temporarily forgotten or yet to discover their being as brilliance and light, I'll see something less than love, and I'll be able to see it as a cry for help and healing. I'll be able to see them as another weary traveler who's questioning, who's searching, who's aching for a connection that never left them. I'll see someone who's hidden behind the veils of their own perception, created by their own judgment, created by their own intellect, which, as Way of Mastery would say, has been shoved full of trivialities like garbage in a garbage can. And that intellect in those people that judge themselves as worse or better than someone else, that intellect becomes the veil. It becomes the obstruction to them being able to see their own true nature. And if I can't see and become aware of my own true nature, I can't act from it. Remember, the definition from the ancient Aramaic of faith is acting from the rooted center of my being, or you acting from the rooted center of your being, from your awareness of your true nature. And when you act from that space, everything goes better. In the short term and the long term, everything goes better when we act from the active, total, perfect, conscious, active, present love. You are always total, perfect, active, present love. You can't ever be anything other than that. That's your nature. You are part of the creation expressing in form. You can, however, be unaware of that. You can be distracted by aches and pains. You can be distracted by teachings that you might have encountered in grade school or high school that said, this group of people is not as valuable as you. These people with a different color skin are dangerous, etc. These people might take your money because they come from a different place on the planet. And that's only a set of thoughts programmed into your intellect. You weren't born with them. It's not an instinct. It's not an intuition. It's not something that will guide you to survival at a physiological level. It will, however, help you create judgments that create a distortion in perception that allow you to believe you're separate from those people and that they are less than you or that they are greater than you. And in that belief in separation is the source of our fear. What's the solution to it? To wake up and recognize that we're all connected, to wake up and recognize that there's nothing of true value that can ever be taken from you, and nothing of true value that can ever be added unto you. And so you're perfectly safe in each moment to be wide open and to ask to be taught by life. So here's hoping, as we reach the end of our first hour today, that this is making some sense and making some of the messages from A Course in Love a little more direct. And as far as I know, Michael and Jeannie will be on for their second hour today. And as happens with the Needle app, I will need to close my show, and that means this show will end, and then Michael and Jeannie will turn on their studio and start their second hour, and it should send a notification to others, everybody on our list, that they're starting their second hour. And so I encourage you to stick around or come on back, and we'll be back again tomorrow with more discussion, and we are again inviting your comments and questions or your direct phone calls through the Needle app, NEDL in your app store, AI-assisted radio tuner. I'll remind us all that we come from love, we're made of this stuff we call love, we actually are love, and everything else is false. Have a wonderful day.